back to the show. This is The Law Show on CL 650.
If you don't know how to do it, I'll show you how to walk the dog.
Well done, Dwayne. Walk the dog. There you go. Welcome back to The Law Show. And joining us in studio today is Joe Murphy, QC at MurphyBattista, and Joe Battista, QC at MurphyBattista. So we have the two top guys in studio today, and we're talking about the controversial pit bull ban put into place in Montreal. And we're going to talk about dogs in general in this section. So what is the responsibility of a dog owner? I guess to have control of your animal is number one.
Dog owner, I think in Vancouver and most municipalities, you're required to have a dog on a leash if they're off your property. But generally the rule is if you've got a dog that is aggressive, you've got to take the reasonable steps to prevent them from hurting someone. So that might be not only putting them on a leash, but on a short leash. If you have a 10-pound dog that's aggressive, they're a far different threat to people than an 80-pound dog who's a threat. So your obligation as the owner is to take reasonable steps to prevent the dog from hurting someone. The law says that a dog is sort of entitled to its first bite because until then we don't know if that dog is going to be dangerous. But the reality is, I think people know whether a dog is friendly or aggressive. In some instances, Zach, you get a friendly dog who suddenly, totally out of character, bites someone, and the law seems to say, well, that's okay because we didn't know, no one knew that this might happen.
But as a dog owner and having dogs, my dogs mean bitten by other dogs, the other owner always says, oh, Fluffy's never done that before, and you hear that over and over. My previous dog was a Doberman. I love the breed. I think they're wonderful dogs. They're much maligned because they were kind of like the gangster dog of choice in the 70s, and they were used in all of those kind of movies and what have you. But they're just big pussycats, really. But the perception of the breed is a totally different thing. So the training that dog went through for the first year was intense because I knew that my dog had to be much better than the golden lab that will maybe jump on a 5-year-old and knock them over, and everybody will go, oh, it's just a lab. But if a Doberman does it, well, that's a different story.
That's a good example.
So with a dog bite, now have you ever had a case with a dog bite?
We've handled in the office a number of very serious dog bite cases. Serious in the sense that the person who was attacked was very, very badly hurt. And when I say that, Zach, I'm talking more about the mental and emotional scars than the physical ones.
Mm-hmm. So what kind result from a dog bite? What do people are off work for a period of time? They're just totally afraid of animals?
This one involved a 13-year-old girl, and she was left quite disabled lifelong from the emotional scars. She was attacked by 2 pit bulls as she walked by a house. The dogs were being cared for by the owner's mother, and she had them in the backyard, and they escaped and really, really badly injured this girl, as I say, more emotionally than physically. Mm-hmm. The homeowner policy that people have cover it. So if you have a dog and you're out walking and your dog does something that harms someone else, your homeowner policy will cover that claim.
What's the minimum typically of homeowner liability insurance? Is it about $1 million?
I think typically they have $1 million if you own a home. But if you're just renting and you own a dog and
most people have content insurance, and a lot of people don't even have that.
Exactly. So it's one thing to say someone is liable and to get a judgment against them. It's another thing to collect. So if there's a homeowner's policy, it certainly makes that job a lot easier. But if it's an individual who has no insurance of any kind, maybe no assets, then you may end up with a dry judgment in those cases. So that is a consideration.
Another example I had, my dog was bitten by another dog, and this person that owned the dog was barely making his rent, I think, and had no money. And so, the $800 bill landed on my door. And there was really no way I was ever going to get a nickel out of this guy. But you just have to move on. But that's what you're saying. With the dog, there's lots of situations like that. Somebody has a dog that bites your dog or bites you, and there's no way to get anything out of them.
Well, I think the message, Zach, is if anyone has a dog that, well, maybe any dog, and you're you don't own a home, then you should get what's called renter's insurance or a tenant's package, because that will provide coverage if the dog does something that harms someone or another dog.
Well, you mentioned the case that you had with this young girl was attacked by 2 pit bulls. So are you at all open to the idea of limiting certain breeds in municipal city areas, for example? I mean, that is a case where 2 pit bulls attacked a child.
I think the studies have shown that it's not the breed that's the problem. It's usually the way they're brought up or the way they're handled. There is, of course, a difference between the damage a 10-pound aggressive dog can do and an 80-pound aggressive dog can do. But the experts seem to say that looking at a specific breed is looking at the wrong thing, that you should look more at training the dog. And there was one study done about training kids in elementary school on how to deal with or behave around dogs. And they found that if you train the dog and train the kids, the risk of an attack goes down by about 90%. So,
but different breeds are bred for different things. I mean, border collies are bred for herding, right? Greyhounds are bred for running. And some would argue that pit bulls and Staffordshire Terriers and whatever the many different kinds of breeds were bred for something else other than
bred for fighting.
For fighting, yeah. And having owned a Doberman is the only breed that has ever been bred for attacking humans. Louis Doberman was a tax and rent collector in Germany, and he was an amateur dog breeder, and he came up with his own breed of dog to protect him when he went to collect the rent and tax. He wanted what was called a sharp breed. So he would take these dogs to protect himself because he had money on him. And he developed that breed. It's the only breed that was developed to actually defend and attack against humans. So, I own one of these dogs, and they are big pussycats if they're, well, as you mentioned, raised properly.
Yeah.
And they can be very aggressive if you teach them to be. So,
well, that's the problem, is you get some owner that's wants the macho dog, and he wants this big aggressive dog, and that poses a real danger to anyone who's around the dog.
The problem is we don't know when you approach a dog, if that owner has been doing the right thing and raising the dog properly. So I guess that's where
it's a risk, and this is why if it's me and I'm going down the street and see a 80-pound pit bull walking towards me on a long leash, I'll walk around so that I'm not close to the dog, unless I know the dog. And sometimes you can see just by the way a dog's acting, they're friendly. But it's a problem. It's a problem for the dog owner. It's a problem for the people who are around the dog. And it's a problem for other animals, because sometimes one dog will attack another. And again, if it's a big, powerful dog, the damage they can do is terrible.
I think that's more common, is one dog attacks another, and the little fluffy dog gets, injured or killed in some instances by bigger dogs. Yeah. Now, Joe, do you think that these sorts of bans on specific breeds will hold up over time? Do you think that these municipalities will ever get these things through?
I don't know. I think it's obviously the decision is a very close one, because the judge in Quebec reserved or suspended the implication of the ban until to think it over. Even if it does, I think it'll go further than just the first instance. It's a novel idea. I mean, I understand constitutional law. It's usually different types of issues, but in this context, it's hard to say if this is unconstitutional or not. Obviously, the SPCA has some thoughts on it, and I don't think
they seem to be against this ban, right?
They are, and I think either way, I don't think it's going to end with this court decision. It'll probably go a lot further. Constitutional matters often go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. I don't know if this one will, but certainly constitutional matters, especially a novel one like this, I don't think it'll end with this first decision. It'll go further.
I guess it comes down to somebody's individual right to choose the kind of dog they want, right?
Versus the right of the world to be safe. Yeah, it's a balance. The jurisdictions that have brought in these bans have often dropped the ban after realizing that it really wasn't making things any safer. the rate of dog attacks in jurisdictions that have these bans is no different than the rate of dog attack in jurisdictions that don't have a ban. So the problem is being able to identify the dangerous dogs and being able to make things safer, and that's an almost impossible task.
Yeah, but I think it is. I mean, when you have a lot of dog owners who don't even license their dogs, then you have a situation where you don't know, the dog at hand. Any final thoughts on our dog bite segment today?
Well, I would say that we should be putting the emphasis on training the dogs. To require dogs to have formal training is like saying someone you gotta be able to pass the test for driver's license. Mm-hmm. And why shouldn't we do that? And I think the elementary school kids should have some training about dealing with dogs, because if they don't have a dog at home, if they don't have any exposure to dogs, they have no idea how to act around a dog.
I do see a cultural divide in my neighborhood with some Asian children are very afraid of dogs.
Yes,
because maybe in their extended family there aren't any dogs. Now I know many people, many Asian families that do have dogs, but it's not as common, right? So I think that that fear that a child gives off to a dog is also a prey element, right? They want to if they chase them sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and the worst thing the child can do is run, and then it just goes from bad to worse.
Yeah.
So these kids should, they should take an hour or 2 or 3 in elementary school, maybe over the first few grades, and just spend an hour. Bring a dog in and teach kids how to behave around a dog.
All right. When we come back, we're going to switch gears totally. We're going from pets to powers of attorney and the importance of that with our 2 guests from MurphyBattista. We have Joe Murphy and Joe Battista in studio, and we'll continue our conversation on The Law Show next on CL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CL 650.